Welcome everyone to the second session of the conference on sports and urban transformation. I'm Christopher Gaffney. I'm a professor at New York University, calling in from Rome, where I'm on a sabbatical year. And it's a true pleasure to be able to participate in this session, and thanks to Jonathan and Lucas for the invitation. I was talking with Jonathan previously. My career in sports studies has really seen a lot of transformations, and the topics and the diversity of people in this session is a real expression of how the field has changed over the last 30 years. When I did my master's 26 years ago, there weren't many people writing about sports in a critical way, and the only sports geographer of any note was John Bale. And I published my first article in a book with him in 2001. And since then, we've seen a real explosion in the complexity of theory around sports. And not only are people starting to understand sports with more depth, but applying very complex geographic theories and bringing sports more into mainstream conversations around geography, the shape of the world, and how humans and non-humans express themselves by, through, and with sport. And so it's very exciting to see the range of topics on display here. And for me, it's particularly satisfying to see the work of Gilmar Mascarenas, who sadly passed away a few years ago, to see that revealed in so many different social, cultural, and urban contexts. And so I'm very much looking forward to the conversations we'll have here, and look forward to hearing the depth of analysis that all of you are bringing to the geography of sport. And so with that kind of brief and maybe inadequate introduction, I'll hand the floor over to Ankur Konar from the University of Burdwan, who will be talking about Kolkata and soccer and the socio-spatial dialectic. Floor is yours, Ankur.
Okay, am I audible? Yes. Okay. So first of all, I thank the organizer for giving me a chance. And with the permission of the chair, I start my presentation. My presentation will be on Kolkata and soccer, the socio-spatial dialectic. The first thing that I want to point is that throughout this paper that I have called soccer, that the term has been used in US, Canada, and Australia, is also known as football elsewhere in the world. So throughout this paper, throughout this presentation, I will take these two words as synonymous with each other and interchangeable with each other. In addition to that, I also use Calcutta and Kolkata. Calcutta is obviously the colonial pronunciation, and it has officially been turned into Kolkata on 23rd of December 2000. So throughout the presentation, I will also refer to Calcutta and Kolkata interchangeably. The issue that I want to present here is the dramatic appeal of soccer in this part of the world. Right from the very beginning, almost in
Ankur,
1857.
We
Sorry,
cannot
sir?
see your slides. We cannot see your slides.
The slides are not visible.
No.
Is it visible now?
Yes. It's
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So from where I actually just stopped, I begin from there. In this paper, I will try to focus on how football or soccer in this part of the world become so crucial in denoting the cultural, political, economical, and social backdrop of the city. The spark of socio-cultural reformation the soccer generates have obviously reshaped the mental and material makeup of the city like Kolkata. And in Kolkata, if we focus on the historical issues related to soccer, and the Maidan that we called the field become a kind of heritage site. It has been declared so in promoting and engulfing nature of football enthusiasm. Uh, Football has long history in this part of the world. Football had become an inescapable part of Bengali popular culture in colonial Calcutta because the sport has been instrumental in executing the nuanced colonial past of the city. So colonialism, post-colonialism, or later on, I also focus on the last part of the article that postmodern remix of culture, etc. All issues have heavily been allied with the interface of city and soccer. During the colonial period, football's transformed role in the city as an instrument of uh, reaction, resistance, and subversion. These three words are very crucial in denoting how football actually shaped the cultural geography of Kolkata. Uh, this kind of instrument of reaction, resistance, and subversion made a critical attempt to understand the negotiations of the greatness, the glamour, the grandeur, and the glory of the game. And through the intellectualization of the game, the changing relationship of the game with the city in flux in later course of time had a denoting effect of how Kolkata watched and responded to this sport. Because we know that cricket is very popular in this part of the world, but football, with some specific issues like colonialism or post-colonialism, or with issues like uh, communalism, that too touched the mental map of the city dwellers. The synoptic view of the trajectory that exists between Sokar and Kolkata influences the renowned sports critic of the city, Ajoy Basu, who is very renowned for his monograph that I have titled Fire Fire Chai. It actually will be translated into English as When I Look Back. Actually, when he looked back in the city, he described Kolkata as the city of football clubs. So this is the nomenclature. This is the adjectives that actually have been attributed to Kolkata. The rising arc of the Kolkata football and the divergent sporting issues affecting the emotional makeover of the city dwellers have made it obvious that in Kolkata, football has gone pandemic. Soccer in Kolkata and the corresponding amount of space leave a train of thought that this particular game has an intoxicating intensity among the city dwellers' collective consciousness. Once again, it will be very important to use the word collective consciousness because throughout the text, throughout this paper, we will find out how fandom has been created regarding the Kolkata Derby. If we focus on the cultural or historical backdrop of the city's euphoria related to sports, particularly football, the club culture become very crucial. The names like Mohun Bagan, East Bengal, Taliganj, Mohammedan Sporting, this name become almost integrated part of the city's cultural practice. And the city dwellers are quite addicted to the emotional spillover of these club names in that instantly generates. The name becomes more than names, actually. My point is that. I want to focus particularly a passage from David Wasbrook, who in the foreword to the book Goalless, the Story of a Unique Footballing Nation, which has been published in 2006. Wasbrook referred to the fact that he actually equates the city's love for football as a kind of attachment to religion. Uh, From the book, I'm quoting. From the early 20th century, Bengalis, especially in Calcutta, made the game very much their own and pursued it with an enthusiasm previously reserved only for the worship of the goddess Durga. So on this point, actually, my interpretation will be that how even religion or religious practices and involvement into sports like football become almost interchangeable. On lizard days, the Maidan, in fact, is a term just to indicate that the field, the Calcutta celebrated park, become covered with throngs of spectators and players alike celebrating the glories of the game. Soccer wove itself into the fabric of Calcutta social life and over time also reproduced many of its distinctive colors. Calcutta expressed its social history through the game. The game itself becomes the integrated part of the city's social history. Not only make issues like sports and culture. Apart from this, there are some larger social contexts. The first two things that I refer to, football's heightened connection with nationalism and communalism. In pre-independence times, many sports clubs of the city played significant contribution in the formation of nationalism. For the third world country like India, and this is the remotest part of India, the east side of India, and here actually these clubs did everything that is possible for them for getting or to make a kind of resistance towards the British. It would be interesting to map out how the exact role that these clubs play in the present social structure of the city. This is also too important. When I am actually talking of largest social context, I will also refer to colonial period. I will also refer to the post-colonial period. The city's self-absorption to the existing football culture and the city dwellers' euphoria related to the visual hysteria in the Kolkata Maidan, along with the plurality of voices, may be cited as the potential spaces for interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary engagement. In a famous book published in 2019, India's Football Dream, the authors are Shantanu Gupta and Nikhil Paramjit Sharma. They actually focus on not only the nationalism. Their point is that not only nationalism, but other allied issues like ethnicity, communalism came to be gradually incorporated with the Kolkata soccer. The geographical, the ideological, philosophical, and communal division of Bengal happened through football. Mohun Bagan Athletic Club today represents what are called native Kolkata Bengalis. So this is very important. Please, I will request all of you how through different names of the clubs, how ethnicity and communalism become very much potent vis-a-vis the sports culture of the city. When Mohun Bagan represent the native Kolkata Bengalis, East Bengal represent Hindu migrants from Bangladesh, while Mohammedan Sporting captured the imagination of Islamic attachment. The name itself is very clear. And then the glorious year came, that is 1911. The glorious trump of the 1911 IFSC final achieved by Mohun Bagan. So this is to remind all of you that in 1911, the IFSC final, Mohun Bagan defeated East Yorkshire Club by 3-1 in favor of them. And that became not only mere win, rather it was a socio-historic incident that defined the monolithic and airtight British rule that ruled throughout India. This dramatic win was in fact, as Moti Nandi, a famous player, who described it as a victory for India's self-respect and her nascent nationalism. The barefooted 11 players of Mohun Bagan virtually dragged the white man of East Yorkshire Club under their legs. So this is very important. And during this final, many countrymen from all over India actually visited Kolkata just to get a touch of how they can beat the white man. One interesting fact regarding this game, particularly after IFSC final, the question of football and bootball. Because in this IFSC final, 11 Mohun players played barefooted without wearing any kind of boot. So then question is that in the duality over foot and boot, it is absolutely clear that only the native players of Kolkata had played football, while the rest parts of the world were busy in playing football. So what today we are describing as football, originally played by Mohun Bagan. And as this discrimination became very much part of all over India, in 1953, All India Football Federation, by following the international rules and regulations of soccer, came out with some specific guidelines for the Indian players that insisted on to wear boot in the field as a compulsory act of reference. So football in this part of the world is not merely a game, rather it becomes socio-spatial dialectic. Now I will focus on the famous Kolkata derby, which has been enlisted into FIFA's list of classic rivalries. Though there are many clubs present in Kolkata, in the sports map of Kolkata, the two particular club, that is Mohun Bagan and East Bengal, these two clubs and the rivalries between these two clubs become much more than a kind of rivalry, not only in field but also off the field. Tinged with historical and cultural significance, the Kolkata Derby, the Bengali reference we called Boro match, a big match between these two arch rivals, is one of the most fiercely contested and best attended derbies in the world football. And through a radical polarization on a derby day, the city is divided into two parts. These trajectories, under the rubric of cultural reflections, essentially become the spatial dialectics of Kolkata. The duality of a space of inhabitation and site of imagination was supposed to alter the face of city's topological hypothesis. The Kolkata-centric Epar Bangla, which has been focused on Kolkata, versus the Dhaka-centric Opar Bangla. So the border is not only in between two countries, but the border is there even in India, in the field.
Excuse me, Ankur, if you could move on to a conclusion. We want to be wary of time because we have quite a few presentations. So if you can finish in the next few minutes, please.
Okay. So in the last slide, I will focus on how a 21st century Kolkata actually visualizes the post-territorial remix of culture. In 1948, Bobby Mood, later Diego Maradona in 2008, and then Lionel Messi in 2011 and 2025 visited Kolkata and become awestruck with the fandom the audience generated. And the latest issue, the addition to this cultural map of Kolkata, is the post-globalized epiphanic clubs like Atletico de Kolkata, which has been actually formulated with a kind of that we called post-territorial borderless state. So my point is that in this paper, the soccer, with its long-standing preoccupation with the city of joy, continually influences and modifies the social history of the city. This is actually the crux of my presentation. So thank you all for giving me a chance.
Thank you so much, Ankur. Very, very interesting analysis of Kolkata football. In interest of time, we will save all our questions for the end. So we'll offer our thanks to Ankur, and we will move on to Balbir Singh Alaka, excuse me for murdering your name there. Ordinary sport, ordinary cities producing urban space through football, and Kabaddi in Mumbai. The floor is yours.
Bobby is absent today.
Oh, so we skipped.
He had some problems.
Sorry. So we move on to Dr. Omollo and Solomon Waliaula from Maasai Mara University to talk about football fandom typologies, ethnic geographies, and urban communities in Nairobi, Kenya. And we
Thank
can
you.
see.
Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen just fine.
Just a minute, then organize myself again. Yeah, better?
Yeah, we just need the presentation mode.
Okay. I'll do that. Good. Can you see it?
Oh, we can see it, but we don't see the presentation mode.
It's not.
You can go to from current slide, go left two,
Current.
right there.
Left.
Try that. Try the one
Okay.
to the right. There you go. Now we're good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's me, Solomon Waliaula. I am co-presenting this with Maurice Omollo. Both of us come from Masai Mara University in Kenya. And Maurice Omollo is the geographer here. I come from cultural studies. And I have been in the world of sport studies for a while, since my PhD, which was on football, soccer commentary, as oral performance. And I've gradually gone deeper and deeper into ethnography and what have you. And now working with Omollo, we want to talk, or rather I'll talk on his behalf, about football fandom typologies in Kenya. And our focus is on the ethnic geographies. You call them ethnic geographies, but I just mean that we are talking about how football fans in Kenya. First of all, football fandom is a very urban practice in Kenya. Secondly, that we have this paradox that the football clubs which are very popular and famous are from the rural areas, like Ankur talked about the East and there where football was famous. So football is like attracted people from the rural parts of Kenya, but then through some historical circumstances of colonialism and stuff, and struggle for independence and the idea of the British colonialists sidelining some communities which appear to be resistant to colonial rule, they end up attracting those that were further away from the center. And that's how to create this. So that's a summary of the whole thing. And I can move to some key concepts here. One is football fandom typology, which is a concept I borrow from Giulianotti, talking about the map. Sorry, the spellings, the map of fandom, football fandom as a map. He says, people say they are fans, but you can look at the categories of fandom in terms of how they kind of create identities around football. And that there are those that are so close to football in terms of being fans, that part of their life, not part of their life, maybe all of their life is revolves around their being fans. And there are those that are close to like the exotic flannels and followers and supporters that, well, they're into football fandom, but perhaps through something else, some other interfaces, like consumption cultures, branding, and in football because of what it presents of them to the society. Yeah, so there's something between them and football fandom. So for us, we picked two specific, I'd say specific typologies. That one, we've had fans in Kenya whose connection to football is like this ethnic community, this identification, that they mark their identity as communities through their football fandom. Then we have the football fandom that's popular culture oriented, where fans mark themselves as fans because of trends. The trends about football is classy, the football jersey, the football language, and this even cuts across beyond Kenya and Kenyan clubs to European clubs, and so we have this distinction. The other concept I pick very quickly is now the two clubs, FC Leopards and Gor Mahia fandom communities, and these fan communities are like they are fans who identify as supporting these clubs, but mostly that their participation starts off from, or rather manifests in a diverse range of media, from attending football matches in the stadiums to participating in physical and network communities, fandom. Okay, and then I look at another concept here, marginalized communities, urban communities. And in this study, we use this in reference to the low-income communities that reside in the informal settlements of the urban geographies. And why this is key is that it looks like the history of football in Kenya has been that it is the low-income urban geographies that produce and sustain football. The football as an athletic activity and football fans, and what Ankur was calling the beauty of football. Actually, the beauty of football, ironically, is in the urban, marginalized urban spaces. Yeah, and then urban coping strategies. We talked about how football in Kenya has become part of existential methods of navigating everyday life, in the sense that the urban poor, among other strategies, use football as a mobilizing tool around which they can support each other through uncertain lifestyles and vulnerability and lack and all that. And we have this term called chama. It's a Swahili word for team, organization, or group. But basically just means people come together into groups to help finance each other when they have problems. They pull resources together and finance each other. And in the recent past, football fandom has become part of the mobilizing factor for people to come together, not just watching football matches, but also forming groups through which they support each other in their real experience of life. Then I look at the historical, geographical origin of football fandom or as a coping mechanism. To start off, I link this to Ankur's presentation about how football in Kenya is really linked to colonialism, colonial legacy. Why is that? When the British came to Kenya, it was a settler colonial space. And of course, there was this resistance from those communities that were living in the spaces, where the British took land away from them. So the Kikuyu, the Kalenjin, who were living near Nairobi, the White Highlands, as they called them. So the British pushed them out. And as they were building now the urban space of Nairobi and the other Nakuru, Mombasa, the urban spaces, of course, there were jobs. There was now urbanization. But now these people that had disenfranchised, that they had offended by taking out their land, could not work there. So they had to go very far to the west of Kenya to get the laborers who would now have to be migrant workers, having moved from the west of Kenya to live in Nairobi, away from home. And therefore, accidentally then, the British constructed this Llull and Luya football fandoms. Why? Because first of all, the Llull and Luya laborers, having come from far in the west to Nairobi, had to have welfare activities, but that were safe. They were not fighting the British. Like Ankur's paper was football as politics. This wasn't politics. This was now football as had been curated by the British and as has been allowed to be a safe space where the Llull and Luya laborers, during their free time, they can have fun, they can engage, and perhaps not think about fighting back. Yeah. And following this, then the first clubs, 10 clubs that formed the first league in 1963, 7 of them were in Nairobi, 2 in Mombasa, 1 in Nakuru. But all these clubs, maybe the first 7 in Nairobi, ironically, were all about the ethnic communities coming from the West. There was none that was based in Nairobi as a Nairobi club forming out of the urban space. It was about people from the West coming to Nairobi and trying to hang on to their cultural identities by forming clubs that are in the name of their of tribal and sub-tribal identities. So even the names would be like Luo Union, Bunyore, Samia. Those are just names of either ethnic or sub-ethnic groups from that western part. So what we had here was now a strange form of urbanization through football, where the people living in town and using football use their rural identification, or rather perform their rural identities in town using football. And it became a source of like holding on to what they had left in the villages back in Western Cape. And moving on then, gradually, because of politics again also, I'm not following the slides, I'm just talking to them. Because of now politics, nationalism, moving towards independence, 1950s, 1960s, these clubs kind of moved together. Those that came from closely related ethnic communities galvanized together to form bigger clubs. So that now, for example, FC Leopards came together as a club that had about 5 sub-ethnicities of the Luya. Gor Mahia came up as a club that had 2 sub-ethnicities of the Luo, or rather 2 branches of clubs that were both Luo coming together. In this case, the post-colonial nation state, that ethnic communities coming together to get maybe more power as they fight for the national cake. So then football became deployed in that process. And like I said earlier on, then paradoxically, it now looked like football in the urban space was working. First, was working for ethnic identification, holding on to what had been left behind, but then now also working for the politics of the nation state, building close to, during, and after independence. So I move on. But now it came a time when the politics of Kenya began to shift from, say, the earlier ethnic outfits of we have the Kikuyu, the Luo, the Luya, who is in government, who is outside, and there being no space to air frustrations and difference in opinion. There was no space initially. But from the 1990s, moving this other side, now we had multi-party politics in Kenya, and now ethnicity as a tool in society and culture was changing. Now we had political parties where people join and fight for their interests. And football as well also in the urban space was also changing. So that now we had football fandom more or less based on popular culture and trends. And the previous ethnic symbolism and mythology around which the football fandom was based gave way, or rather accepted elements of popular culture. So that the 2 clubs, FC Leopards and Gor Mahia, previously representing ethnic communities, now were representing certain aspects of popular culture. That FC Leopards was now about the machismo, masculinity, and that for Gor Mahia it was about the style and panache, So now we had people who didn't belong to these communities joining, depending on what they find attractive. If somebody wants machismo and this masculinity and the idea of being tough, they identify with FC Leopards, which actually is leopard, and you know that all that thing about the leopard and the strength and hunting alone and stuff. Or Gosh, or Maya, the stylish panache of representing oneself. So gradually then we had this initially ethnic outfits using football to perform something bigger, something different. Now moving to popular culture, still football again, but now other images coming from the ebb and flow of popular culture coming into play. However, we still have elements, ethnic identities such as songs and dance, remaining the performance of football fandom for Gor Mahia and its Leopards, but we also have other elements coming in, merchandising, material aspects, people just celebrating being fans of this club by wearing some jerseys. So it's more or less like how now Kenyans support European football, support Arsenal, Manchester United, and all that. So that connection, moving away from the identification, which is cultural, to popular, to trends, as it were. But now moving to the other point that for us is very important for this work in progress, the retooling and repurposing of Fandom in the urban space because of the realities of life in the low-income settlements. So football, initially it was used as a tool for people to hold on to the past, to their rural identity that they had left. Now people have stayed longer in town and have formed urban communities. And perhaps the connection to the rural area or the anxieties and nostalgia has kind of like reduced. So now we are building urban communities. And these urban communities, of course, most of these communities are in the low income settlements, and life there is a bit difficult. Every day comes with its own issues. Nobody's sure about what will happen tomorrow. It's low income. And again, because ethnic identification, much as it moves with urbanization, the people that are so low income oriented, going with our politics in Kenya and all that, people tend to move to live in places where people of their kind also live. So you have estates like, let's say, Kawangware being for the area, mostly like maybe Matare, partly Kibera being for the Llull. So we realize in the context that we are now, we still have this ethnic networking in place, but the problems now have changed. It's no longer about trying to remain Llull, but trying to survive in town without enough money. So what happens now, these fan groups now engage in, first of all, of course, the football activities, they're trying to go to the stadium together, buy tickets, organize transport and all that, but also use this space of football fandom as, I think, retooling it. It becomes chama. I said chama means like a club or like, party. It's an ambivalent word, chama. So it becomes a space where they can come together and contribute funds and have some kind of security. If somebody has a problem, they say they have lost their job, they can't pay their rent, where do you go to? Go to the chama. Football oriented, but go there and you can borrow money and pay. If someone has lost their relative in town, burial, funeral expenses, where do you go to? Again, these people. So many problems now that are urban existential find a way of getting addressed through this football fandom. And that's why we say that then this repurposing of football fandom perhaps is also indicates the shift in the urban experience for the fans. That if initially the fans had problems with connecting and remaining attached to their homes, now they have problems of surviving here and now. Well, of course, this is a work in progress. We could go on and on and on, and also may present our data and findings, but that would not work for us. So it's like we just gave this, talk to it, and then during the questions and discussion, perhaps we can bring more study to the rest of the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Solomon. Very fascinating work, and look forward to the discussion around this at the end. Really lovely. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the digital legacy gap, public perception, and technological evolution of Barcelona 92 venues by Marcela Garza from Ramon, Llull University. Marcela, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Christopher, and thank you, everyone. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay, let's see.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be here sharing this work. I wanted to share that this work is of two of my students, and we work together in this idea. So this is still an ongoing work we are doing, but I'm very happy to present this. My area of expertise is in digital transformation and digitalization of sports marketing practices mainly. But we started exploring this idea of Barcelona venues related to Barcelona 92 Olympic Games. So I hope you find this interesting, as I do. And well, as you might know, that mega events such as Olympic Games have long been analyzed as catalyst for human transformation, and Barcelona 92 it's an example of a success legacy story on Olympic Games. The thing is that now we want to study if this successful legacy that Barcelona 92 has brought to the city, now if these venues comply with what society expects and with all this digital transformation that we have been living through. Because it is true that the venues are still utilized for different activities and mainly sports activities. But we believe that technological legacies under-theorized in long-term cases. In this case, well, Barcelona is one that could be studied. And also is because, of course, if we are talking about digitalization, it's not that digitalization has been around for over 30 years as Barcelona 92. So there are some areas that we know if we study legacy and legacy in as a long-term impact of mega events in the host city, and there are different types of legacies. And I was taking a look at this and I was wondering if the Gaffney that I have here is you, Christopher, the one I signed.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. So, well, you will know more about this for sure than I do. But then there are different types of legacy, and what has usually been studied is, well, infrastructure development, economical impact, social and cultural effects, also if there is a tourist boost. And then we have also literature about gentrification, indebtedness and cost overruns and environmental impacts of mega events such as the Olympics, but we are not going into this topic now. What we want to study now is, okay, now in 2026 and from a few years until now, recent games integrate, well, artificial intelligence, 5G digital systems, and we see like smart stadium, IoT integration, AI operational systems, cybersecurity ecosystems. So our thing here is like, okay, legacy has traditionally been conceptualized as and including economic, infrastructure, and social dimensions, but technological legacy is underdeveloped as an analytical category, as we have seen the other ones. So this is where we want to contribute here and see, okay, if we take Barcelona 92 as an example, if there is something that we can talk about. So we believe there is a structural disconnection between the implementation of technological innovation in legacy infrastructures and the public's perception. This is an ongoing work. It's not finalized. We are studying this. So we're also analyzing the public perception on how, I will explain this in the methodology, but how people here in Barcelona see if the venues are currently using the technologies that a smart stadium uses, let's say. Okay, so the aim of the study is to address the gap by integrating digital transformation into legacy theory, right? So our main research question is, to what extent have Barcelona 92 Olympic infrastructures been maintained and adapted to meet contemporary technological and social expectations? Right, so as I said, we are still in an exploratory phase. We are starting with this project. So at this point, we have done 3 semi-structured interviews with Olympic technology and legacy specialists. So as one professor that was working and studying during Barcelona 92 Olympics, and for a few years he continued to do academic research in Barcelona 92 and other mega events. And then we have also interviewed a couple of people that has been working in different Olympic Games and in digital companies. And well, they have more information about what the different venues are doing now, how Barcelona is using these different technologies, and in general. So then we also have a quantitative analysis where we did, at this point, we have only 66 survey responses of Barcelona residents, that they were also residents back in 92. So they lived the Olympic Games, they were here, so they were young people at the moment, and they have been familiar with all these changes that the city has faced. Okay, so the idea is also to get this perception of use and technological updates of Barcelona 92 venues. So Barcelona as a success story, we know that they continue to use the venues. So what people think, people currently, they 80% of them, they say that they are familiar with the venues that we shared, that they were built for Barcelona 92. There is a strong symbolic attachment. And the perception is that the venues are mostly used occasionally, which this is not entirely true, because the venues are used in different ways and with different teams, and they are used, but the perception is that they are used occasionally. So at this point, we can see that legacy remains culturally embedded, but not deeply integrated into daily life, maybe. So another thing, when we talk about perception of technological evolution, only 24% of these people have noticed technological improvements. 30% said that they have not seen anything at all. And the people in the middle, it's like, well, probably, but not really. So the most visible things that recognize is maybe digital ticketing or QR ticketing and connectivity. But what they don't see is smart energy systems, AI technologies, and data management. Okay, so also speaking with the experts and the people involved in these venues and in these digital companies, they say, no, well, there has been significant technological evolution. There is AI-driven crowd management, IoT systems, digital twins, cybersecurity infrastructure. But as most of the technologies happens behind the scenes, now we can see why people doesn't see what's happening. So at this point, technology prioritizes security and efficiency, not necessarily user visibility. So this is where we have this mismatch between the people's perception of what the technology advantages that the venues have right now. But it is true that there are retrofitting challenges in older venues, because in the end, it's over 30 years that Barcelona 92 happened. So there are some constraints. And as we think that, of course, these venues were built in a pre-digital era. So some of the smart redesign is very limited. It's not that we can, as some new venues that, or these venues that are being built now, that they are already smart venues, and architects are already thinking on building them to be sustainable, to save energy, save water. At this point, in 1992, this was not something that people was thinking about. And well, so there are some communication gaps, we can say, between the society and what's happening. And well, as we know, technology prioritizes at this point in these venues security and efficiency over user awareness. So we have seen some practical implications. So for Barcelona venues, we can maybe make innovation more visible or enhance user interaction, integrate digital storytelling in the venues. And for future host cities, we'll plan digital legacy from the start, that this is something that is now happening, and align innovation with user experience. We believe that by pushing this, there will be an aligned story between what society sees, what society thinks and perceives, and what it is actually happening. So one of our main contributions that we want to share is, for example, legacy must be technological, sustainable, visible, so somehow integrated. That's what we are proposing in this work. And in the end, this work aims to contribute to extending legacy theory into digital era. So we know that legacy, as I said before, it's about infrastructure, it's about the impact on the society, it's about it's infrastructure, society, and economical impact. But we believe that technology should be also included now as a core area to study from legacy in the last games, as we have also latest Olympic Games that they have adapted different technologies. And well, to demonstrate that technological adaptation and digital transformation is not socially self-evident. So there are things that are obvious, but then there are things that from people that it goes and watches sports or league the sports not necessarily see of what's happening there. Right, so to conclude, I think I was really quick to pass the time. So to conclude, Barcelona 92 remains a successful legacy model. So it's been years and the venues are still used. All the urban transformation that happened that year or during those years, it's still current and useful. So, however, technological adaptation has been partial because, of course, it's limited. Much innovation is invisible and public perception lags behind implementation. So as a final takeaway, in the digital era, legacy is no longer only about infrastructure or survival, but about technological intelligibility and social integration. So thank you very much. And I see. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcela. You were you were ahead of time, so we gained a little time for more questions.
Yeah, I was very worried to be to extend, so I just went very quickly. So
that's okay.
But
I'm sure we'll have lots of questions, and you'll get your chance to expound more upon your excellent presentation in a little bit. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're going to Brazil and the importance of newspapers for determining urban toponyms, the case of the quote-unquote downtown of Rio de Janeiro and the founding of Vasco, Casaca, Lucas Nascimento from Universidade Barcelona, and Ufi. Lucas.
Okay. Can you hear me? And I will see my... Yeah,
we can hear you and see your deck.
Yeah, perfect. So, good afternoon, everyone. Talking in English is a challenge for me, to me, okay, but it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm Lucas Nascimento de Mattos. I'm doing my PhD in the University of Barcelona and the Federal University from Rio de Janeiro, Fluminense, no, but from Rio de Janeiro. And today I'd like to take you to Rio de Janeiro, not just to talk about football, but to explore a fascinating question. To me, it's fascinating, and I don't know about you, but how a football club's address became a central piece of urban identity and how the press played a key role in writing that story. So this work is a very little part of my master's investigation. So now I know most people in Europe and in the world don't really follow Brazilian football. So just to give you some context, in Rio de Janeiro, there are 4 so-called big clubs: the Botafogo, Fluminense, Flamengo, and Vasco da Gama. 3 of them come from what today is the wealthiest area of the city, the South Zone. And Vasco, however, was founded in the central and the port region of Rio de Janeiro. And that's already a clue, because if you look at the map, at this map, you see Vasco, the top club, so at the top, no, and while the others aren't. So here's the puzzle. Why don't the other clubs have a suburban identity, but Vasco does? So my central research in this presentation, central research question is, how did Vasco da Gama, a club founded in the very heart of Rio de Janeiro in 1898, become universally known as the city's quintessential suburban working class team? And this isn't just about a question about a stadium move. It's a question about how urban identities are constructed, remembered, and often rewritten. To understand the core of this issue, it's necessary to recognize that the concept of suburb in Rio de Janeiro has undergone an ideological hijacking. In many languages, suburb simply denotes proximity to the urban core, referring to areas nearest to the city center. But in Rio de Janeiro, however, the term carries a pejorative meaning, evoking notions of urban substructure, marginalized, underserved, and symbolically separated from the city's formal identity.
Lucas, can you put it on presenter mode, please?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, now?
Perfect, thank you.
So, this dilemma brought me to a critical challenge. How can we recover this collective urban memory? The answer lay in the pages of his historical newspapers. Periodicals from the late 19th and the early 20th centuries served not just as news sources, but as a mirrors of everyday life. So this research uses newspapers analyzes to trace Vasco's geographic transition from downtown to North Zone suburbs, decode how press narratives reshaped the club's territorial identity, and recover lost spatial perceptions through classified ads and sports coverage. My methodology is based on three key references. First, Gaffney, who talks about sports space relations through memory and territoriality. Then Rodriguez, who defends historical geography as a method where history isn't just a context, but foundational. And Maurice, who reminds us that time is the intersection of global and local processes, and the space is not abstract. It's lived. It's a lived, concrete, full of everyday life and singularities. So let's start with the investigation. This first map shows the distribution of Vasco rowers in 1904, so 6 years after the Vasco foundation. The vast majority were concentrated in parishes like Candelaria and Sacramento, which, according to the geographer Marcela, were the central parishes of the city at the time. The second map shows those same parishes in red, and the black symbols are the Vasco's headquarters between 1898 and 1942.
Lucas, we can't see the maps. Can you move your slide, please? There we go. Thank you.
These maps? Can you see these maps?
Now we can, yes. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So the first map, the distribution of Vasco rowers in 1904. The second map, the same map, but with the same parishes, but with the headquarters from Vasco da Gama between 1898 and 1942. As we can see, Vasco was born and raised downtown club. Its administrative headquarters stayed in the center of the city until 1970. But the core of this research is about identity. One of my hypotheses is that Vasco's current suburban identity persisted, in part because its original downtown identity was never really strong. To test that, I need to define downtown not by today's standards, but by the standards of 1890s. That led me to build this yellow polygon you see here in the second map. So how did I build it? I did extensive research in digital archives of real newspapers from 1890 from 1899, the decade Vasco was founded, looking for mentions of Centro da Cidade, so the downtown, center downtown, with specific addresses. And the most matches came from one expected place, the classified ads. Why classified ads? Because when people place it an ad to rent a room or sell a business, they used landmarks and areas names that everyone understood. By georeferencing those addresses, a pattern emerged, this yellow polygon. We've established that Vasco had a central origins. The question becomes, why didn't this identity stick? So, sure, the move to São Januário station in the North Zone in 1927 explains the physical shift. But the identity transformation involves deeper layers. And that's where newspapers help us find more answers. So in this map, we can see all the fields utilized by Vasco da Gama between 1916 and 1927. So analyzing newspapers. Before the 1940s, clubs were almost always identified by their exact addresses in Rio de Janeiro, obviously. Vasco was the club from the Rua da Saúde, Rua is a street, or club from Santa Luzia, the neighborhood. The Fluminense was from the club from the Rua Álvaro Chaves, so the street Álvaro Chaves. Only this time, peripheral clubs were identified by the train station, like the Bangu station team. After 1940s, this changes dramatically. In the Jornal dos Esportes, the main diary of sports from Rio de Janeiro, we start to see a new label for Vasco, the North Zone Club. At the same time, there's a process of spatial erasure. So Vasco's activities are no longer tied to downtown, but are vaguely located at their Santa Luzia headquarters. In 1950, the Maracanã Stadium was inaugurated by the municipality of Rio de Janeiro. So as the big clubs migrated to this new arena, press narratives began reframing Vasco's stadium from a symbol of progress to a relic of the past. This discourse of a structural decline started in the 1970s and only intensified through the 21st century. In 1999, amid all this talk of obsolescence from São Januário Stadium, redevelopment plans started to emerge, and the capacity expansion and modernization were on the table, but so was a debate about surrounding urban landscape, seen as difficult to access due to narrow streets. And during the club centenary in 1998, the municipality officially created the Vasco da Gama neighborhood, institutionalizing the club's connection to its immediate surroundings. So in the 20s, as national conversations about racial and class prejudice gained momentum, Vasco's historical achievement in 1923, becoming the first Brazilian club to win a major trophy with black and poor players, took on new symbolic power. The club began strategically incorporating this narrative into its identity campaigns and reinforcing its ties to neighboring favelas and like the Barreira do Vasco and Tuiuti, and solidifying its image as a club rooted in social struggle and inclusion. This media reframe continues to this day. So, and it creates a kind of dual narrative. And on one hand, the media, the press, celebrates the Vasco identity, its connection to favelas, its anti-racist history, its legacy of inclusion. And on the other hand, when reporting on the same favelas outside of a sport context, the press often perpetuates stigmatizing narratives. So the focus shifts to the violence, neglect, and lack of infrastructure. A street named after a young man killed in Barreira do Vasco becomes a headline, but the context is a tragedy. It's a tragedy, not celebration. So here is what we've learned. Newspapers didn't just document Vasco stories, they actively helped rewrite it. And because first, from 1898 into 1940, the press identified the clubs by their exact addresses, and then it changed with the time. This confirms what Hasbard calls deterritorialization, the loss of original spatial anchors and re-embedding through media narratives. And it reinforces Rodriguez's idea that historical geography requires not just archival maps, but also the lived vocabularies of space. And that's it. Thank you.
Benissimo. Thank you, Lucas, for all the Vascaínos out there. Like myself, this is very encouraging work. I'm glad to see it. Thank you. Now, look forward to talking about this in a few minutes. And now we'll move on to Noah Randehoven, who will present Brexit FC. Do football clubs and their migrant playing staff act as local symbols and affect leave voting patterns in the 2016 Brexit referendum? Floor is yours, Noah.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to share my screen. Not present. Okay, can everybody see that?
We're good. You're ready to go. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, thank you for that introduction, and it's wonderful to be here. I've enjoyed the presentations. For me, it's the morning. I guess in Europe and other places, it may be the afternoon, but thank you for having me. So my name is Noah Vanderhoven, and I'm a PhD candidate at Western University. I'm also a project coordinator at the Body Politics Lab under Dr. Amanda Friesen at Western University. And today I'm presenting one of the parts of my dissertation research, looking at how local soccer clubs in the United Kingdom can act as symbols of migrant workforces. So when I was inspired to do this research in the early part of my doctoral studies, I was asked to think about various topics about sports and politics that I think I could research for a class. And one of the ideas that came to mind was looking at the Brexit referendum, because there have been many different kind of understandings of this vote choice put out there, but one thing that I thought was interesting, and it's not entirely related to it, but it was kind of a motivating factor, was in kind of a short period of time with the referendum and as well the results of the English Premier League that season, there was a lot of kind of shocking results. So as the referendum drew closer, expectations of pollsters and betting markets were far from aligned. The polls implied a much higher likelihood that the UK would vote to leave the EU than the betting markets indicated. However, the eventual leave position was quite surprising for the betting markets, as they became even more kind of steadfast in their belief that there would not be a leave vote as the voting grew closer. However, that was not the case. And that was not the only shocking result that we saw that year. There was the kind of meteoric rise of Leicester City Football Club in their championship of the Premier League. That was quite shocking when the odds before the season implied they were much more likely to finish near the bottom of their league and be relegated to the lower divisions than they were to win. But nonetheless, they were able to win the Premier League, and that was quite another surprising result that happened just before the Brexit vote. So there's a kind of common understanding of the decision to vote to leave the European Union in 2016 as a highly emotionally charged decision based on multiple dimensions of protecting in-group identity and economic opportunities from perceived out-group threats. So this got me thinking about how sports events and teams represent another area where political development can occur, with various social interactions, themes, and in-group, out-group dynamics taking place in sports games and leagues, presenting opportunities to influence political behavior. So this left me with a more specific research question for this. So does the composition of English Premier League, Championship, League One, and League Two clubs, the top four male professional divisions in England, relate to political attitudes of their communities? And I'll get into a bit more about this in a bit, but there is some kind of foundational work about the role of sporting teams and leagues, especially national teams, and the idea of national identity and being symbols of national identity. We've heard some about that today, but this is focusing on the aspects of sports teams and clubs in the United Kingdom and how they may be a symbol of migrant workforce. So another article that inspired this was this article about exposure to celebrities reducing prejudice and using Mohamed Salah, a prominent footballer for Liverpool, and looking at reductions in Islamophobia. So this develops a lot about parasocial contact, so the idea that celebrity figures can expose others to other lifestyles and cultures, and this may eventually lead to a more accepting view. So this is building on contact theory and the idea that as you come into contact with more different social groups, you'll become perhaps more accepting of different cultures and lifestyles. I apply this in other areas of my research, looking at the effect of social causes in sports settings, such as pride events, sporting events in North America. But as I mentioned, there's also been research looking at the role of sport success and excellence in building national identity as a global symbol of national excellence. For myself, living in Canada, we've seen this a lot with the sport of hockey, and we've seen discussions over that amidst tense political moments with the United States. However, in addition to the possibility of parasocial contact that I'm hoping to build upon here, I also believe there's a reality that sport can present a powerful avenue of society that is understudied when looking at adult political socialization in sports settings, as they can bring people into contact with political and social messaging and news in a way that they may normally avoid as an entertainment platform. And this may give them, greater political mobilization in ways that they would not have been expecting. And in this case, and in this paper, I'm focusing on exposure to symbols of migrant workforce in soccer clubs. So looking at the literature more broadly, sports fandom and identity has been shown to hold a strong psychological connection that can create feelings of inclusion and boost self-esteem. So it can really play upon in-group dynamics. And if you're symbolizing that people who you may not traditionally associate as a member of your in-group are part of this kind of sporting in-group, this might promote broader acceptance. Sports results, or whether your team wins or loses, has also been shown to affect views on immigrants, decisions to vote and protest, and trust in political leaders. So there's also this connection to other political behaviors. Sports results have also been shown to boost in-group favoritism and information processing and performance assessment. So people have been shown to be more favorable towards people that they see as, whether it's in a sporting context, whether it be in a national sports team or a professional sports team that they root for, when assessing the performance of a player or processing information about an event. And also about the decision to buy goods from specific vendors. So they may display favoritism towards a vendor that is wearing a jersey of a team that they support. Finally, amateur sports leagues have been shown to foster intergroup contact and reduce prejudice in the Netherlands, India, and Iraq. So there's also this grassroots role of sports. So for this paper, I have three main hypotheses. So constituencies with teams that have more non-homegrown status players, and I'll expand upon that in a little bit, weighted by minutes played and other key performance indicators, will have a lower percentage of votes to leave the EU in 2016. Constituencies with a higher percentage of EU migrants and more non-home status players, weighted by their minutes played and other key performance indicators, will see a lower percentage of votes to leave the EU. And finally, constituencies with a higher percentage of non-white residents and more non-homegrown players with the similar weighting as before will also see a lower percentage of votes to leave the EU. So overall, the percentage of EU migrants and the percentage of non-white residents within a constituency will moderate the effect, I believe, of the sporting kind of symbolism of a migrant workforce. So my main dependent variable for this analysis is the percentage of votes to leave the EU in the 2016 referendum. So for this, I used data from Handready, which were estimates of Brexit results based on Westminster parliamentary boundaries. So for each of the four leagues, their respective constituencies will be those corresponding to the stadium with which their teams reside, so where the team stadium resides, and then it will be within a Westminster parliamentary boundary, which is matched by postal code. So for example, Arsenal Football Club's Emirates Stadium has a North London postal code of N77AG, which corresponds with the Islington North constituency based on the Handready estimates and the Westminster political boundaries, whereas fellow North London club Tottenham Hotspur have a stadium postal code of N17OBX based on their stadium, and that would correspond with the constituency of Tottenham. So each team was coded to have a corresponding Brexit constituency, which then can be related to their Brexit leave vote percentage. I should note there was one case of a constituency across the four top professional leagues in the United Kingdom that had teams sharing the same constituency based on these stipulations. So to account for that, I also included a measure of the number of teams in a constituency to have basically a dummy variable for this. The case involved at the time Championship club Fulham and Premier League club Chelsea, who both reside within the Chelsea and Fulham constituency according to these stipulations. So the most kind of, I guess, novel contribution, or the thing that required me, I guess, to go out and collect the most data was looking at a novel independent variable. So in the Premier League, there was what is considered a homegrown status player. So any player over the age of 21 with British citizenship, or someone who was trained in the United Kingdom before the age of 21 for at least 3 years. When thinking about how teams construct their playing squad, the team must register at least 8 homegrown players to be able to register 17 non-homegrown players. And this is carried out across the professional leagues in this data set. So what I was able to do was collect data on the playing squad members of each of the teams for this season across the 4 professional leagues from English League 2 all the way up to the Premier League, as well as key performance indicators in goals scored, minutes played, and assists. And then I was able to create a weighted proportion of contributions by non-British players. So in addition to players participating, it is also trying to capture players who may be more prominent in their participation, because that was one of the big findings. I think in the Mohamed Salah article was looking at, it's not just that he was a prominent figure, it was also he was a very strong player for the team, and that had additional kind of positive social contact effects. So those are the main measures, and I'm happy to talk about that more afterwards. And then the controls were just quite standard controls for team performance, which is the finishing position in the respective leagues. But then I had random effects by league in the models that I will discuss briefly next. And then I also follow the aggregate Brexit work of Goodwin and Heath. So I used aggregate level measures from census data of residents over 65 within a constituency, residents with no educational qualifications, and finally non-white residents and immigrant residents within a constituency. So I used 2011 UK consensus benchmarks, which is the closest census prior to the referendum, and this is all designed to closely align with the existing Brexit research. So the general idea, to reiterate before I go over the results, is that teams will have different fan groups and then they'll have different playing compositions. And teams will end up making very different compositions based on their goals, and also in some cases the reflection of the wider community. So we have teams like Arsenal and Burnley may have very different playing squad compositions and also general compositions of people who live in those constituencies, and those will be kind of affecting the relationship. So I have some geographic controls. This is a general map, and I have further maps in the appendix of this presentation, but generally this is kind of the relationship I'm looking for. There's a general distribution of Brexit vote patterns, and this is showing London, England, and then there's a distribution of teams within those constituencies, and some teams are part of constituencies with higher Leave vote percentages and some constituencies with lower Leave percentages. So that kind of has some heterogeneity across the dependent variable. So the first models here look at just the footballing kind of measure. So this is without the Brexit controls, and we can see that basically for every additional non-British player, team employed, and based on the weighting of the key performance indicators, there was a reduction of 0.3% of Leave vote percentage. And this holds in a linear model specification and a random effect specification. Now, when I introduce the Brexit controls, these relationships are no longer robust. These are quite strong controls, and these are generally the kind of strongest variables that have been seen in the wider Brexit literature to understand Brexit vote patterns. But I've also done some preliminary analysis of the statistics without the weighting. So basically taking apart the weighted proportion and doing it for minutes played, assists, and goals by the player. And the trend generally holds. One interesting thing is that assists seem to matter. So assists were robust across this treatment, but these are the results I feel comfortable with presenting now. So in conclusion, I found that the weighted number of non-British players relates to Brexit Leave vote of a team's constituency. And this only held during the introduction of football-related variables. So I found that for every additional non-homegrown player on a team's playing squad, the weighted for minutes played and other key performance indicators, including goals and assists, relates to a 0.3% decrease in Brexit vote within a team's constituency. Now, this result was not robust with full model controls used in prominent Brexit vote models, yet these results are robust for football-related controls of player performance, as well as under random effects by league. So there's some evidence of the relationship between football clubs as a symbol of local migrant workforce and Brexit patterns. However, it is not a robust relationship. One area I hope to continue to develop in my research is to include British election study data pertaining to immigrant attitudes by constituency, which link up well to Westminster parliamentary districts, and as an alternative dependent variable. And I'd be open to hearing any other feedback and comments. And there's some contact me and my website, but thank you for having me, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks very much, Noah. Very interesting work, and look forward to talking about it soon. Right now, as a matter of fact. So great, we have half an hour for conversation, and I think I will. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, just use the hand raising function, and we'll start with Luca.
Yes, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Luca. I'm here from Brazil, University of São Paulo and University of Innsbruck in Austria too. And I have two questions. One question in regards to a colleague that made the work in Kenya, if I'm not mistaken. My question goes to the opposition that you make about ethnic community fans and popular cultural market fans. And I would like to understand if you analyze this historical process of change. When you analyze the historical process of change, if you take in account the process of amateurship and professionalization of the sport, and the transformation of this sport into an industry, in what kind of elements this process implicates in Kenya by itself, because when we analyze the case in Brazil, by example, the television is really important, plays a really important role. The process of television, of when the football matches start to be broadcasted, and other people from other regions start to support different kind of clubs, and doesn't need to go to the stadium anymore, and has different kind of relationships. So, but this regards a really important restructuration of the country, of the state, and of the capitalism of this society. So I'd like to know if you take this process that regards to amateurship moment and professionalization of the football as a moment that has an importance in your analysis. And the second question goes to our friend that was studying in the Brexit. It was really fast presentation, so I hope I understood correctly. And like for me, you took in account that the regions that you are analyzing are the regions near of the stadium. So you figure that the persons that live nearby of the stadium are the persons that support the club of the stadium, right? So like this is what you expect, and if it is, I would ask if it has concrete correlation between that, because it's not the case in Brazil, by example. It's not like that. Like people can live nearby of the stadium and doesn't support the club at all. But the opposite can live like really far away from the stadium and support the stadium and support the club of the stadium, and vice versa. And another one that I was thinking, question about the same Brexit topic is you showed to us like there has a relevance to non-British players and clubs to have a position against Brexit. And I would and I believe the opposite would be the same. Like you have like more British players would have more a position more inclined to the Brexit. And I figure if you ever thought in a discussion about the culture of the clubs that build the condition and reasons why they don't hire, why they don't buy players that are not British. Because I think like when you think about some clubs in Europe, this is a really important aspect of the hiring process. Like for a long time, like Zenit, for example, of Russia, they never hired a non-white player. When they hired one Brazilian player, was a really transformation process of the culture of the fans itself about having non-white players, for example. So you thought about making this discussion about the culture of the clubs regarding that would shape the condition of the club to not hire non-British fans, because this is the thing, like is the hiring process of the players that produce the perception of the fans, or is the perception of the fans that produce the condition to the change of the Mannschaft of the players in the club? That's it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Luca. Let's start with Solomon, and then Noah, you can respond afterwards.
Thank you so much for the question. Actually, more like food for thought. Yeah, because when we talk about football in Kenya, amateur or professional, it's neither here nor there. Because actually Uganda, our neighbor, Tanzania, Rwanda is smaller than us. All of them have smaller economies than us, Kenya. But in Kenya, football has never gone really professional. Never become business oriented, and people can work there and money can be made. It hasn't got there yet. Perhaps because of the same colonial legacy. I'm just giving an hypothesis, but now that you have asked the question, and it's nice because we can go further into research for this, that as the economy of Kenya grew, because football has to feed on the economy, feed off the economy, the funding, the everything. But the same communities which were kind of at loggerheads with the British, the Kikuyu, the Kalenjin, are the ones that had the money. They are in the industry. They are the big millionaires in Kenya. They don't invest in football at all. We have athletics, which perhaps because of the nature of it being simpler to manage, is much more pro than football. So still we have community football just, masquerading as professional football, but the players, the fans really fund in these communities, and politicians fund them too for their own reasons. But most of our good players in Kenya would go to Tanzania, to Uganda to play as professionals. So in Kenya, we still have a long way to go to move from amateur football to professional. But it's an area I want to explore much more. So thank you for the question. Thank you.
So if I could just follow up on that, and Dr. Omollo, maybe you can help answer this question. I was curious about the change in the spatiality of the fandom as it relates to changing urbanization patterns and wealth distribution within urban contexts. And I know that perhaps by following social media accounts where people are posting about their teams, and you can geolocate those posts, if you've identified any way of finding correlations between this change in fandom. So people that live in a very wealthy part of town will follow a team that's nowhere near them, but because they like the new kit, for example, as you've identified this social transformation to a consumer choice. So I wonder if you could reflect on that for a moment before we move to Noah.
Thank you. I don't know if I'll allow my colleague to say something. He was raising his hand. Omollo. Through the chair. Please.
Thank you. Actually, what I wanted to say was the Kenyan context.
Yes, please, Dr. Omollo, we can't quite hear you.
Volume is low.
That's better.
Am I audible?
Not yet.
Not yet.
What about now?
It's still quite soft.
It's soft.
Try again.
Now, what about now?
Yeah, a little better, but just speak loudly.
Okay. What I wanted to say in the Kenyan context, football clubs are actually run in a more or less neat way, and there are very little cases of nationalism.
I'm sorry, Dr. Omollo, we can't make out what you're saying.
It's okay. It's okay. I think I'll stop. I think there is a problem with connection. So
It seems like, yeah, okay. Apologies for the connectivity, but we need to move on to Noah, and so we can have some more questions. Sorry about that. Noah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, these are great questions. I think on the first one, in terms of like the area near the stadium not necessarily guaranteeing fandom, I think that's a very relevant concern and one I've thought about before. I think the best idea that I've been able to come up with about that is looking at basically the distances between the teams. So, you know, if there's a team quite close by, you'd be able to measure basically if teams that have more teams kind of closely related to them versus teams that have kind of a greater distance between another team in the data set. That might be one way of controlling in kind of a proxy way about, you know, how likely it is that someone living near the stadium would be a supporter of them. But that is a very relevant concern. I guess it's one that's harder to deal with. The second one, I think, is also a good point about, I guess, both the looking at teams with decisions of more British players, and also I've had it brought up in the past of looking at, you know, how teams with rivals who have different migrant workforce populations, how that might affect it. But generally, and I have more detail about this in the full chapter, but basically the logic was that the hiring decisions would ideally be considered, you know, within kind of a merit-based system, just based on the fact that if a team doesn't perform well, they would be relegated to a lower division, and this would kind of place a pressure on them to try and hire the best players possible that they can afford. However, that kind of the cost of associated with this also does tend to lead to teams who are poorer performing or lower in the football pyramid, so they play in lower leagues in the United Kingdom. They tend to have more of a British squad members because they don't have to kind of the cost to recruit them in terms of scouting and generally paying for them is not as high, and they tend to move from club to club a little bit easier. And that was, I think, a lot of what we saw after the Brexit vote was that there was some reinforcement of this within the football pyramid in terms of teams becoming more likely to hire British players and younger British players. What I do think is interesting that kind of comes from this, and I touched on it a bit in the presentation, was looking at perhaps like a case study approach to looking at teams that tended to hire more British players and teams that tended to hire less. So I had the example of Burnley, which was the kind of quintessential example to me at the time, where they tended to have a very British squad, a very white British squad, versus a team like Arsenal or some of the bigger teams where they have a history of procuring talent from kind of foreign leagues and having great representation of that. The picture in the slides was the time when Arsenal had a starting 11 that was all BIPOC individuals. So that kind of representation was kind of a strong symbol of that. So I do think that an interesting takeaway I had from the question is kind of maybe looking at a case study approach of that, even in just the kind of the introduction of the paper, because I do think that teams have different decision-making processes that they go through for hiring players. And I think you're right that for some teams, they're taking the leadership on this, and in some cases they're more influenced by the realities of their local community where players are going to have to live, and the amount they can kind of basically pay to bring players from foreign countries. So I do think that is a really helpful insight, and those are kind of some of the thoughts that I have on that.
If I could just add to that before we move to the next question, I just want to suggest that maybe it's not only minutes played and visibility in the stadium itself or on television, but also represented in things like shirt sales or advertising, where people associate faces and people with the shirt in non-footballing contexts, and that those kinds of representations may be just as important as how many minutes someone plays on the field. And so I know that's maybe a little harder to see, but if you looked at the 2016 Liverpool kit announcement, you would see Mo Salah, Van Dijk, except you would see immigrant players representing the team in a very public way. And then so you could also measure that through shirt sales, for instance. The other thing I would like to caution you about or to highlight, is that Brexit went very much along class lines. Wealthy, cosmopolitan people did not vote to leave the European Union. And so, Arsenal fans probably, wherever they were not going to vote to leave. And so this has to do with season ticket prices, the relative wealth of fan groups. And then finally, I would suggest that removing the condition of non-white residents might help your research be a bit more inclusive, in the sense that many, many millions of British people are non-white, born in Britain. There are South Asians, there are people from the Caribbean, there are people from Africa, there are Irish that live and so these are, Irish people might not consider themselves to be British, but yet they were born and raised in the UK. So as a demographic consideration, that was something that struck me that you might want to reconsider.
No, thank you. Those are really helpful insights. I really appreciate the insights about the controls and stuff like that. That's very helpful. Also, I really think that the shirt sales thing and the kit announcements might be a good line of a inquiry, just to look to see if there's something that I can sort of show in more detail. And also, you make a good point about the class lines aspect of it, and I do think that possibly looking at ticket prices at the time could be a good way to try and control for that from maybe a more like club focused aspect of controlling. So yeah, those are really, really helpful. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Open to questions. Jonathan.
Thank you everyone for the presentation. I would like to question to Ankur. If you could speak a little bit more about the relation with the coloniality, how this appears in your study. Solomon already told us about a little bit this subject. And to Marcela, I'd like to know if you find something critical to this legacy gap, this digital legacy of this in Barcelona, but or others examples as well, like how this digital legacy could be cause some damages for the privacy of the people, etc.
Ankur? Ankur. Okay, well, let's move on to Marcela.
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan, for your question, and thanks everyone for listening to the presentations and for your presentations to all the colleagues. I have learned a lot. Yeah, so I was reflecting on your question about this digital legacy could be caused by maybe privacy of data. I don't think this has to do mainly with it. So, of course, data privacy is a challenge, and this is something that sports events and sports organizations are already facing. But I think that when we're talking about, for example, mega events legacy, it has to be more with, for example, these venues or all these cities infrastructure, all the things that are built at a certain moment for Olympic Games or for World Cups or for all of this. So at this point is that, okay, venues are built or rebuilt, because at this point also the Olympic Committee is searching for host cities that they don't need to build everything from scratch. So they're now seeking for cities that already have venues. Maybe they need to be refurnished or updated, but not necessarily built, because we know that this affects sustainability and other topics. So we believe that this legacy gap goes beyond, in the sense that, for example, in Barcelona 92, as at that moment we didn't have AI technologies in arenas and all these kind of technologies. So it is more than now these new venues that are built or are refurnished, are already adapting this. For example, in the different cities, in that moment in Barcelona, for example, the rondas were built. So the rondas is these two main big streets that were built in the upper part and the lower part of Barcelona. So Barcelona has the sea and then has a mountain. So in the sea, they built this big street, and in the mountain. So the people or the traffic can go around the city without interfering in the city center, let's say. So they build this, and 30-something years later, it is something crucial. So for tech legacy should be something like this. So there are already smart cities that have, for example, Wi-Fi. Barcelona is one of those, that they have Wi-Fi in the city and people can connect and they do things. So the technological legacy, I believe, is more in this way. So, of course, there is a challenge of data privacy and cybersecurity and all these kind of things, but I believe that it's different topics here. That's my point of view.
If I can follow up with that, and there, for me, as you have read, since you've read one or two of my articles, I'm extremely suspicious of the word legacy, and I want to hear a little bit more about what you mean by legacy, because there are many negative legacies as well as positive legacies. And I think the consensus among critical academia is that we talk about impacts and not legacies, because legacy is a word that is deployed by FIFA and the IOC to justify the benefits of their projects. So legacy is one. Sustainability is another word that needs to be called into question, because it's totally undefined, and we never really ask what is being sustained for whom and under what conditions those things are being sustained. And so if we think about this in the context of technologies, mega events and new stadium constructions are always an opportunity to showcase new technologies in the sense that they are being sold to global customers, and that we develop and so if we say now it's necessary to have facial recognition technologies for ticketing, which was rolled out for Tokyo 2020, now you can no longer go to a stadium without registering your data onto an app and giving over your face to a company and your data, which you don't know what will be done with it. And so this is not sustainable, even though the technology, and so the technology is not neutral. It's never neutral. The stadium itself is a human technology for political purposes, for sporting purposes. And so first is this legacy, sustainability, and then what is technology in this context? Is it only digital technology? Football itself is a human technology. Stadium itself is a human technology. A pen is a technology. So defining what we mean by technology is also important in this context. Okay. And so these three things at the core of what you're talking about are really important to define, and especially in the context of a place like Barcelona, which has the legacy, quote unquote, of Barcelona is a successful games, but it's one of the few cities in the world where we see constant protests against tourism, which is also an outcome of the Olympics and the deployment of short-term rental technologies. And so relative to the point that Jonathan was making, I think that these are important distinctions to be made, because technology is not neutral in its development and its deployment or the after effects of it. And we saw this in Rio in 2016, where there's installation of all kinds of cameras and surveillance technologies, and those technologies are then used in the urban context when the games are gone. And so they are put to secondary and tertiary uses for which they were not designed. Also in Germany, it's not just everywhere. Qatar, Russia, wherever it happens, it's always the same. And so a technology, maybe, like we take the conversation around AI, why shouldn't we let AI just go run freely? Well, there are consequences to developing AI. In the same way that there are consequences to, quote unquote, modernizing stadium technology, on which we then become dependent, which we then have to continue to finance, and we can't opt out of. And so this is the essence of going to a stadium, is being one with a group and celebrating, or at least participating in a vibrant cultural life, that the technology itself starts to erode. Yeah. And so if you could respond to any one of those things, I know it's a lot.
Well, thank you very much for your reflections. I really appreciate it, because for me, this is a topic that I'm exploring, and actually the fact that you are sharing, like, okay, legacy is not always legacy, and there are different ways on thinking about what is legacy and defining this. I will take all this information because I am exploring this, and as I said when I presented, there are two students that came with this idea, and I am getting to know this area, so I really appreciate it. And also, I understand that sustainability is a different thing, and we need, or I need to also define what do I mean by technologies or different digital technologies, because it is true that my expertise is in digital technologies oriented to marketing practices. So I'm exploring a new area here, so that's why I am really grateful for all this information. And I pursue with this study. First thing is to define what do I mean with all the different constructs or ideas that I'm sharing. So I appreciate it, and I understand that all these negative effects and all these negative consequences that there could be, and I think that I need to explore more in this side, because from my point of view, I work in from the business side, let's say. So of course, I'm in this part of how we can use technologies and how we can make profit from technologies. And I see different startups with different ideas on how to take advantage of technologies for different things. But it is true that then they are misused or they are not aligned with the objectives, and sometimes sport and fans can be affected by it. So yeah, and I see like these examples of if you go to an arena, if you go to a stadium, and now your face is all over the place, and they have all your data and how to manage it. So this is also a complete topic of this data privacy, and I understand now what you say, and now that I see the link, Jonathan, on this.
Yeah, and someone else can jump into, but I just wanted to highlight that it's not neutral. And as you're coming from a business data marketing perspective, the deployment of data marketing technologies in stadiums, particularly in Europe and the United States, and at major events, is walking hand in hand with postmodern digital capitalism. These are not separate. One is not separate from the other. So Barcelona is a business that's taking your data and selling you more Barcelona, selling you more products. It's selling you Spotify. It's not about fandom with digital. It's about maximizing money and maximizing profits. And this is not what football at the grassroots level should be about. But this is the way of the world, and it's not unfortunate. It's just the way of the world. Luca.
Yeah, I just want to comment really briefly about it, because that's why I said about Germany there in the chat, because I study Bayern Munich in Germany, comparing it to Brazil. And the example of Germany for this case, if you want to think about the influence of technology into the manufacturing of the state, and the relation of the fans with this transformation, I think Germany is a really interesting example to look at it, because the German fans, the German football fans, they have a really intense dynamic with this element of control, even because they have a really strong culture of data protection that regards a lot to the German culture related to privacy and a lot of different elements. So in this regards, I think it's important that's why it's interesting to reflect over the elements of the German conditions and actions, and thinking through the German culture itself, to think about how they act through that, to think about, in the Spain example, to think about how Spanish people think through these elements of security, privacy, to think how they relate with ideas of control in the stadium, etc. Because, like, of course, the World Cup is an enormous example of how FIFA make an enormous process of expansion of the technology of control in football in general. But I think the Olympics happens to make the same case right now. Like in the case like Brazil, we have the World Cup and the Olympics and the Pan American Games at the same time, like in sequence. So it's an example too. But in Brazil, we don't have such a culture of defense of the data, of reaction against the vigilance control. By example, in here we accepted really easily the idea of the facial recognition to get inside of the football stadium. But in Germany, they didn't. By the opposite, they just had an immense protest this last year, in the end of the year, against this new level of control that Germany is trying to implement. So I think this kind of relations to think about technology, intentions, and resistance of the different kind of cultures. Germany can be a nice example to reflect over the Spanish condition. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all your reflections. I'll take all of these comments into account for the research. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Further questions? We have time for one last quick question. Well, I'd just like to also highlight, I mean, this is such a diverse group of people and studies. It's really fascinating to see, and all coming from quite different perspectives. And it's encouraging to see the robustness of the debate, and I'd like to thank the organizers for bringing together so many wonderful presentations and thinkers. and for inviting me to chair the session. It's been a real pleasure. And Jonathan, back to you.
Thanks for everyone from the presentations. Very, very interesting, a lot of different point of view. And in the next few weeks, I will send more information about the publications or partnership that we could do afterwards. And tomorrow we will have two sessions tomorrow. One will be at 12 noon, another at 5 p.m. So we keep in touch. Thanks so much for everyone, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you.